We've got our front bench here to react to what we just heard and the possible implications for this campaign. Sharon Carr is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. She's now a partner at Sovereign Advisory and advising the Liberal campaign. Jamie Ellerton is a Conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us here in studio. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And next to him, that's Hannah Thibodeau. She's a former news anchor and now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Carl, I'll start with you. Not a lot of clarity there, but an example, I think, of how we continue as a country to kind of be, in the wait-and-see game at the edge of our seat about what kind of economically devastating news Trump might throw our way. Yeah,
and it's his... and in a way, is the one thing that's helping the Liberals the most. Because when Justin Trudeau was clinging to power during the presidential election, they were secretly hoping, the Liberals, that Donald Trump would win because it would be, Justin Trudeau, the contrast guy. Of course, we know what happened, but now that Mark Carney is in, it's even working better for them, because they do not want somebody that looks like Trump, that acts like Trump, that talks like Trump, and every time Donald Trump does something like this, the one that benefits is Mark Carney, because he's seen like the guy that can stand up to Trump in a serious manner, and he's not using the same kind of tactics or slogan or way to do politics.
It's interesting, Hannah, because until today, Trump had been less of a story than he was over the last month, let's say. Like the campaign itself was driving the narrative. There were announcements around affordability policies from all three campaigns. Obviously, he was in Gander, Mr. Carney, he was in Windsor, but that's also just speaks to what Carl's saying. Like, clearly the Liberals feel they have an advantage on that ground. Absolutely. They just are helped along today by Donald Trump, not necessarily the campaigns themselves.
I was trying to decipher what Donald Trump was talking about there, too. Yeah. Best of luck. I know. Actually, we were sitting here going through, and you picked up, you picked up on something that's really interesting, and I'm just moving away from the campaign a little bit because I want to give people a little bit of hope, potentially, is that he did say foreign-made cars. And if you look at U.S. statistics, and I was looking at this just before we came on air, that our systems are so integrated that even parts that are made here in Canada under U.S. statistics are still considered domestic production for the U.S. So crossing fingers, that's what it is. But you knew that Mr. Carney and the Liberals were placing themselves ahead of this announcement by doing that announcement and giving money to automakers, workers in the auto sector earlier today. And wasn't it interesting, too, is the image that they portrayed right in front of the bridge, showing the exact same location that we saw Doug Ford in his campaign.
It looked pretty familiar.
Look it up. Yeah, look it up, because it's really fascinating to watch. So they are clearly using the same similar type of playbook, because it definitely worked for Doug Ford, and the Liberals are hoping that it continues and works for them. So this announcement today, I think I agree with Carl that it does help the Liberals in this election campaign.
Jamie, what are your thoughts on that? And I would add, I guess, maybe the caveat: does it matter what the announcement is? If, in fact, there isn't an impact in a large, salient way on the Canadian auto sector, and in no way taking away from the threat of one, the April 2nd tariffs, all that stuff. But if we dodge the so-called bullet today, is it as impactful as the Trump factor has been, let's say, prior?
I think anytime you hear the White House talking about imposing tariffs and its impact on the Canadian economy, it's ultimately not a good day for the country. In terms of the politics on this, I would agree with some of my panelists that this is indeed perceived to be a strength issue for Mark Carney. But I think it also presents an opportunity, because when you think of like what the negatives and people are trying to bake in on the negative side of Pierre Poilievre's brand, if he doesn't fit to type as a result of this impression that Liberals are trying to paint him as, and instead comes out as a strong defender on Canada, it actually gives Pierre Poilievre an opportunity to show that he can lead in a crisis like this. When you listen to what Mark Carney has to say, they're always talking about his CV and what he has done, not what he's going to do in this campaign and what he's going to do on a go-forward basis. And so I think there's an opportunity for Pierre to kind of step into that leadership vacuum and demonstrate what Conservatives are going to do. On the policy side, we know that the Conservative leader has been quite clear that if the Americans impose tariffs on Canada, there'll be reciprocal tariffs. And ultimately, I'm in the same boat as you, Vashi. We can never know what Donald Trump says, what's actually true. We'll have to wait to see what the written word of the executive order is and respond accordingly.
The interesting part is the policy versus the politics, Sharon, because on a policy front, if you really come down to the basics of it, Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, and Mark Carney are all talking about retaliation in the same way. Nobody is saying, yeah, let's roll over or anything like that, right? And obviously they have differences in the way they would build up Canada more, internally focused, but in particular about the way they would respond to Trump. There's not huge discernible policy differences. What does that mean for the politics of it?
Well, I think we have to remember that a lot of this has to do with tone and tenor, and we just saw President Trump speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't hear him refer to Canada as a 51st state. I didn't hear him refer to...
Not yet. He's still speaking, I will warn you, but no, yeah.
I should probably knock on wood because I probably just jinxed it. But a lot of it has to do with the tone and tenor, and we're seeing a shift, and I think a lot of it that we've seen up to date had to do with the previous administration. Now, yes, everyone has said a level of retaliatory tariffs, but the difference is going to be who comes to the table. Now, do we have someone like Mark Carney, who I think someone like Donald Trump would respect more? We already heard what he had to say about Pierre Poilievre and that he wasn't very nice. And he's one of those guys that he's, I would say, petty. And I think a lot of this had to do with pettiness and name calling. And we haven't heard a lot of that yet. So I think the politics will still be there. But I do think the temperature has gone down, and the temperature hopefully will continue to go down now that Trudeau is out of the picture. And I think we're going to have to see where the politics go. But I can't see someone like Pierre Poilievre being able to have a constructive conversation with someone like Donald Trump, because they're combative versus combative, and I don't think that works with him.
Okay, we are just getting word from the White House, obviously through Donald Trump, that he is announcing a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars. We don't know exactly when it will come into effect. He has just apparently said, according to one of the producers of this show, if parts are made in America and a car isn't, those parts are not going to be taxed or tariffs, and we'll have strong policing on that. And he continues to say it's going to lead to cars being made in one location